Hey there, it's Tony, and today I'm going to show you a video a little bit different. I've got a Seestar S50 smart telescope, and I'm going to show you a video of setting it up to use N.I.N.A. N.I.N.A is well-known software in the astrophotography community for having really good control of telescopes and filters and optics and those kinds of things. And I use it quite a bit with my Seestar, particularly when I'm trying to do fairly complex mosaics. And so with no further ado, let's get started. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and start up my Seestar Android application. So I've powered on the Seestar using its power button. And now let's go over to the Seestar app on my phone. So I'm starting up the Seestar app, and there it is. It's going to go ahead and connect to my Seestar. And you can see there it is, fully connected. I've got about 92% battery power. Things are looking good. And so the first thing I want to do is I want to open up the Seestar arm. And the reason I need to do that using the app, using the phone app, is this then tells Seestar its location information. It wouldn't ordinarily know that if I went straight into the N.I.N.A app. And so let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go click on stargazing. I'll skip this section here. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to click on the joystick, and I'm going to move the lens of the Seestar to point roughly southeast facing at about a 40 to 60 degree altitude. The reason I'm going to do that is I'm going to show you, once we get into N.I.N.A, a polar alignment routine. And by pointing the telescope in sort of that rough direction of south, slightly east, and about a 45 degree altitude, it helps the accuracy of the polar alignment. So let's go back into that joystick setting. And for those of you who are familiar, click on fast. And I'm going to move it by dragging the joystick over. Just hold this in for several seconds to kind of get the lens moved over towards the east facing. And then let's go ahead and move it up in altitude. So we'll get it to about where we want it. And we'll stop about there. You're not really going to see anything on this image here, or I've got a fairly cloud-covered environment right now today, but we don't need that. So there we are. So we'll stop right there. And then the next thing we want to do is go ahead and take a look at the N.I.N.A application. So this is interesting. So when you start up N.I.N.A, by default, it's able to recognize the Seestar S50 Alpaca driver. So that's kind of built into N.I.N.A. You don't have to do anything once you've installed the N.I.N.A software. And so sure enough, you can see that the Seestar has been recognized in the profile. And so this is actually from a previous connection that I did, just to be clear, that it can see the Seestar. But ordinarily, when you power on the Seestar and then power on N.I.N.A, it would recognize the Seestar hardware. So one interesting thing, if you notice here, it's marked as offline. That's because I haven't connected N.I.N.A to the Seestar. So I'm going to go down to here and I'm going to select connect all devices. And you'll say, wait a minute, what do you mean connect all devices? There's only one Seestar. And I'll show you what I mean in a few moments. So let's click on that. And it takes a few seconds for the different aspects to power on. And once it's powered on, you notice that if I go to equipment tab here, and then you see these various elements here, there's camera, filter wheel, focuser, mount, and switch. And they've all got a little tiny power button here. So something's happened when I powered on the N.I.N.A with the Seestar. Let's go to the camera tab first. So you can see here, it's recognized the Seestar camera. It's showing the pixel size. I've already inputted the default gain setting for Seestar. So around 80, I've chosen. It even shows you the camera chip temperature, kind of interesting information. And then if I go to filter wheel, you'll know if you've used the Seestar for a while, it actually has 3 different covers over the lens. One is a light pollution filter, one is an infrared filter, and the other one is a dark that covers the lens for taking dark images. Now, with using N.I.N.A with Seestar, automatic darks are not taken. So if you've used the Seestar app on your phone and you image, the darks are automatically integrated into the images that you capture. And as a reminder, what is a dark image? A dark image represents the inherent noise in the camera chip at a certain temperature. And so with N.I.N.A, you would have to take the step of collecting darks for when you do further processing in, say, Cyril or any other processing software. So I'm going to leave that at the light pollution filter just for the time being, and I'll show you the darks collection in a second or two. So let's go over next to the focuser. And so again, in Seestar, there is the ability to focus the lens. And sure enough, with this N.I.N.A integration, you can do that also by moving these buttons here. The next one is looking at the mount. So the Seestar is also recognized in terms of the area that it's pointed to, the site location. But what I want to call out here is where you set the tracking rate for the mount. So it's not automatically turned on in N.I.N.A. So I'm going to select this arrow here, and I'm going to select the sidereal rate here, because I'm going to be tracking the stars and the galaxies. And so I click on set tracking rate. And so now the Seestar then knows to start doing the tracking. The next thing we want to do is let's go over to the switch setting here. And this is another interesting area of integration. So you can turn on and off the dew heater in the Seestar. So I'm going to turn it on here. You notice there's no amount settings here, like what percentage of heating. It's either on or off, but it comes in as to be a useful setting. So that's the various equipment settings. The other thing I want to show you on the N.I.N.A integration is this options button here. And so if I click on this, and then if I go to options and then equipment, you can see there again is the camera settings. I can put in the focal ratio for the Seestar. I can put in the focal length. So let's go ahead and do that. So we know it's 250 for the Seestar. I can give it a name, so we can call it Seestar. And I can put in the focal ratio, which I believe is around f5 for the Seestar. And then, so these are basically the settings that we've got in N.I.N.A for the Seestar. This is about all the things that you need to do. The other options is autofocus. So this one's interesting. So just like in the Seestar app where you can do autofocus, you can also accomplish that in N.I.N.A integrated with Seestar. And so basically, I select a curve fitting strategy of trends and hyperbolic. I do a focused autofocus step size of around 20. And then I put in a backlash out setting of around 50. What this is basically the Seestar does a focus, and there's always sort of like a little bit of play potentially in the focusing. So that's why you set this number here. And then the next thing, if I go to imaging, I'm going to save my files as fits files. And that's really all you need to know on this section here. And then for the plate solving, within N.I.N.A, there's a plate solver that's referred to as this ASTAP. So that's the one I'm going to select. Plate solving is just like in the Seestar. The Seestar points to an area of sky, takes a photo, and it looks at the positions of the stars in the image. And that kind of it matches those against a known database of star images. So it knows the position that it's pointing at. So now let's go over to, let's see here, let's go over to the framing button. And the thing I'm going to show you is how I do my mosaics in this example. So let's say in the object name, I'm going to put in the North America Nebula, which is NGC 7000. So after I've selected the focal length, the other thing I'm going to select is my image source. So I'm going to use, in this particular example, the NASA Sky Survey. And when I click on Load Image, you see that the image of the North America Nebula has appeared. And it's showing the chip size of the Seestar in this rectangle here. So I want to gather a mosaic. And so what I can do is on this target section, I can click the plus button. Let's just click it a couple of times, and then let's go up by, let's say, around 3 by 3. So we've basically got a 3 by 3 matrix here for the mosaic. And if we now then go in, after we've got this, is we can go down here and we can add the target to a sequence. So click here. I'm going to select Legacy Sequencer. And then it takes me to this Sequencer tab here. And those different panels are now loaded. And what I would do in N.I.N.A is select the first panel. And then I select the target options. And I want to tell the Seestar to slew and center on that particular panel. And let's say I want to capture, let's say 40 frames. Each one is about 20 seconds. And I would repeat this process for each of these panels here. So admittedly, it does take a bit more time using N.I.N.A to set up your mosaics than if you were to, say, use the framing capability in the Seestar phone app. But I do want to call out that when you're in that framing section, if we go back, this ability where I can actually select many panels if I want to. So I can go really crazy and get a really wide view of the sky, which is a little bit harder to do with the Seestar. So that's why I use N.I.N.A for some of my mosaics. Now, if we go back to the sequencer, so that would be all set up, and we would basically click on play, and it would go through each one of these until completion. The other thing I want to show you is this imaging tab here. And so with the imaging tab, and click image tab down here, for me to take my dark files, if you remember that, the dark images. So I'd go up to this imaging section here. I'd also select a 20-second exposure time, because you remember, you want your dark frame exposure time to match the light frame's exposure time. And then I would turn on loop, save, and then for the target name, we can just call it darks, for example. And then we would click on here to start taking the images. So that's the introduction of setting up N.I.N.A with Seestar and to do mosaics. The next thing I want to show you is the 3-star polar alignment capability in N.I.N.A. And so what this does is basically it moves the Seestar to a certain part of the sky. It takes an image. It does a plate solve, which, if you remember what I said earlier, plate solve is basically the image contains stars, and then N.I.N.A matches the layout of those stars to its database, so it knows which direction the Seestar is pointed. It then takes a second image and then a third image, and this helps it understand the drift of the stars and by how much. And so essentially how much off of polar alignment the Seestar is. The Seestar app, phone app, has its own polar alignment routine. But what I've seen with the N.I.N.A approach is it may potentially, and you'll have to determine for yourself, it seems to give a slightly more accurate readout of the polar alignment. If you remember at the start of the video, I pointed the Seestar at sort of south facing, slightly to the east, and then at about a 45-degree elevation altitude. I'm in the northern hemisphere, so that's why those settings are that way. So let's go ahead and start up. And you see what I'm doing first of all is I'm in the imaging tab there on the left. And then I've got the 3-point polar alignment tab there at the bottom, just below the cursor. And I've already started the 3-point polar alignment. It takes that first image. You see the stars appear. Then it takes a second measurement, waits for the telescope mount to settle, and then captures a new image to solve. And you can see it's doing that up there. It takes a few seconds for this to complete. And then once it's done it'll do the solving of those images. And then it says it's taking a final image measurement point. And you see once that's completed, you'll see some details appear around the azimuth error and the altitude error and the total error. So it's now capturing that third image, it's solving that image, and it'll be able to determine how much off the polar alignment that the Seestar is. And so there it is. You can see that there's a nice diagram there that shows by how much it's off polar alignment. The azimuth error is about 6 minutes off, and the altitude error looks actually pretty good. It's only about 16 seconds off. From experience, my experience using N.I.N.A polar alignment with the Seestar, anything below around 25 minutes is actually a pretty good polar alignment. If it was way off on the mount that the Seestar is mounted on in EQ mode, by the way, I didn't mention that. So on your EQ mount setup, you'll have knobs either side to kind of move the mount east and west and up and down. And those knobs are what you're going to adjust. And the nice thing about this polar alignment is it's giving a live representation. So as you make changes, so you adjust the knobs, wait a few seconds, and those numbers there will change. I'm going to leave this measurement as it is because it's a pretty good one right now. But again, it gives you an idea of the 3-point polar alignment plugin within N.I.N.A. And that's the end of this whole video section. So hopefully it gave you a good insights. And just as a quick summary, we fired up the Seestar using the phone app. We pointed the Seestar southeast 45-degree elevation, again, using the phone app. Then we went into N.I.N.A and we powered on the different elements of the Seestar, it being the telescope part, the mount part, the dew heater part, and the filter part. I showed you using how to frame an image to do a mosaic, take darks images for the Seestar, and then essentially this last part to do a polar alignment. As I say, some people may just prefer using the Seestar phone app, and that's an awesome choice. I like using this N.I.N.A approach for, again, as I said at the beginning, for the more complex mosaics that I might try and achieve. Thank you for your time. Thank you.